All right, welcome back to Bacon Wrapped Business. This is Brad Costanzo, and I have got a fun epi-sizzle. That's right, we don't have episodes, we have epi-sizzles for you today. I have got a guest named Mark Kaye on the show, and before I bring Mark on, I want to tell you a little bit about the what and the why that we're doing, and kind of the background about how I stumbled across Mark and how his humor is the first thing that kind of brought me in. Now, first of all, the topic of today's episode really is how to use a show to build influence, authority, and access to people that you might never have ever thought that you could get a hold of. This is one of the best benefits that I've experienced in the past 3.5 years since I've been hosting Bacon Wrap Business is the access and the influence, which you hear me talk a lot about, that it's given me, primarily through the guests that I get to interview, but also through my listeners like yourselves. And I can't tell you how much I love hearing from every one of you. The best place I like to hear from you is obviously on the iTunes reviews for selfish reasons, but in every episode, you'll hear me give out my email address, which is askbrad@baconwrapbusiness.com, where I encourage you to send me some of your most stumping business questions and things that are frustrating you, whether it's you're looking to grow an aspect of your business or you're just looking to get unstuck. I may be able to give you a second opinion that will help out. But that being said, this is the show that allows me to do that. And I came across a video a few weeks ago or months ago, I want to say, and I'll put a link to the video in the show notes because you've got to see it, and it's all about what every internet marketing video looks like, something like that. And it was hilarious. And then the video went on to make fun of all of the idiocy going on in the hype going on in the internet marketing world, and then he offered to sell you absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. But I got on his list. And after that, I started to pay attention to what he was doing. And Mark Kaye, who was the author of the video and today's guest, then shared another video that I'll also put in here entitled "You Are Not Gary V." And as a fan of Gary V, it got my attention, and I was watching what he was saying, and he said, listen, you're not Gary V, but you don't need to be, you just need a show. And he started to talk about the differences between a show, a podcast, an interview, and quite literally his bullet copy on his sales page for his product, 1,000 Shows, showing people how to create something just like this, maybe way better. Hooked me in. I bought his product. I went through it. Even though I've got a show, I wanted to see what he's doing because I really liked his approach to things. That's how I got to meet today's guest, Mark Kaye. So that being said, Mark, welcome to Bacon Wrap Business.
Wow, you made me sound so much better than I actually am. I appreciate that.
That's why I get the big bucks.
Great. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, as I mentioned, I definitely want people to go click the links in the show notes and watch the initial videos that got my personal attention to want to not only just invite you on the show, but even give you money.
Yeah, no, I appreciate both of those things.
Absolutely.
By the way.
So let's go into a little bit of background about before we jump into this, about yourself. Like, you have a show. You're a broadcaster. Are you on the radio as well? Did I see?
Yeah, I've been a radio broadcaster pretty much ever since I graduated college and realized I needed to make money. And I've done television as well. For years I've worked in several different markets. A few years ago, I started filling in nationally for Herman Cain, who ran for president for a while. And, it's paid the bills, put a roof over my head, paid for my kids' private school. So that was great. But a few years ago, I ventured into social media more and more, than I had before, especially Snapchat, which, for at the time was the big app. It was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
And, my audience on the radio is younger. We play a lot of, younger music, and I need to target a 22-year-old female demographic. So I got on Snapchat and I played around with it. And pretty soon I realized I was horrible at it. I can't draw. I wasn't really sure what I was doing. But I read an article about a couple of guys who were making serious dough on Snapchat with brand stories and with advertising. And so, I'm a capitalist first. So I was always intrigued by people who could use their cell phone and their creativity to make money. So what I did was I revamped my own Snapchat formula, and I created the first talk show on Snapchat called Talkin' Snap. And I got a big, huge write-up in Business Insider. I started getting flown all over the country. I started doing brand deals of my own. And a few 100,000 Snapchat followers later, I had actually kind of become a Snapchat celebrity who interviewed other Snapchat celebrities, and they even called me Business Insider, the Jimmy Fallon of Snapchat. So that's when I really focused a lot on internet marketing and using social media and Facebook Live and YouTube and all these things to create a show, because that's all I'd done. I took what I do for a living, which is do a talk show, and I just put it onto an app, and that's what really made me successful. And when I looked around, I realized that's what made everyone else successful too. Gary Vee being the prime example with Wine Library TV. And that is something that, turned him into probably the first, or at least the most well-known viral video star. Nowadays, as you pointed out in the video, something, and I consider it paying homage to internet marketers, not so much poking fun, although some of the trolls would say otherwise. But with the Gary Vee video, I just looked around, and every time you're on Facebook, every time you see somebody vlogging, you just realize this person is trying to be Gary Vee. And they don't need to do that. They need to do their own. The only thing they need to do that Gary Vee did was create a show.
Well, let's explore that. I just want to stop you right there, because there can be a difference for people who don't really understand, because like you mentioned, there's a lot of people trying to be Gary Vee. So let's dive a little deeper there. Like, what do you see people doing, and they're trying to be Gary Vee, but they're missing the point of what made Gary Vee Gary Vee?
Well, when you look just aesthetically at a lot of people's vlogs, the New York scenery, the jump cuts, the dark music, the Uber rides, talking to the camera in the airport, wearing hoodies, cussing all the time, that kind of stuff. And, I get it. It's a formula and it works, and you're supposed to emulate formulas that work. But you're also supposed to infuse your own personality and not just try to be somebody else. You see a lot of it too with Ty Lopez, people trying to be Grant Cardone, all the big names that pay a lot of money for Facebook ads.
Yes.
The thing with Gary Vee, though, is people are right to want to have a show. People are right to say, I've got a message, I've got to deliver it every day, build a huge audience, and then make a lot of money. That is 100% accurate. What you don't want to do is try to be the character that somebody else is, because you are already your own best character.
No, okay. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it's where I see a lot of people kind of stumbling up there is they want to emulate the people that are doing what they want to do, but then, there's a difference between copying and imitating and using the essence of what they're doing to kind of break that down and say, okay, it's not that I have to be exactly like this person, but I kind of use the framework that they've set out. And explain the difference, because on the sales page, for instance, and in your messaging, you talk about, for God's sakes, no more, like, please God, no more podcasts. You don't need another podcast. You don't need another vlog. Right. But then you definitely don't want to do another Facebook Live either. So you're saying don't do all this stuff, but then you're showing people kind of how to do it, but you're, under the framework of a show. So how do you really delineate between a show versus like a podcast, a vlog, a Facebook Live series, etc.? What should people really think about when they understand the differences?
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people, they write to me and they go, I really don't understand what you're talking about. But it goes back to one of my very first radio jobs. I got hired in Washington, D.C. to do a morning show. And I was in the studio, and the morning show ends at 10 a.m. and then another DJ comes in to take over. And there was the regular DJ was out. I think she called in sick. So this other guy who I knew came in, and he was like, "Hey, how you doing?" I go, "Oh, great, good to see you." And our boss was hanging out too, the guy who was in charge of the radio station, the program director. And we were all just kind of shooting the breeze. And I said, by the way, what are you doing here? And he said, "Oh, I'm here to do the next shift." And my boss, who overheard that, just kind of stopped and said, "Wait a minute, what did you just say?" And he goes, I'm here to do the next shift." And my boss went ballistic. He just freaked out on the guy. And he was like, this is not a factory. You are not paid to do a shift. You're not clocking in, you're not clocking out. You're not creating toasters here. What you're doing is you're going on the radio, and millions of people are listening to you, and they are having crappy days, and they're stuck in traffic. And your job is to entertain them, to put a smile on their face, to make them forget their worries. Your job is to get their attention long enough to keep them from changing the station and going somewhere else where they're going to get the entertainment that you're supposed to be providing. He said, you are not paid to do a shift. You are supposed to do a show. For the next 4 hours, your job is to put on a show. And then he stormed out. And I was sweating and panicky, and he wasn't even yelling at me. But I always remembered that. And I think the other guy did too. By the way, that was the last time I ever saw that guy at the radio station. But and that stuck with me. And every time I go into the studio, I go, my job is not to talk on the radio. Radio is a device to deliver a message. The message needs to be poignant and exciting and emotionally charged, and it needs to connect with people on a deep subconscious level, and it needs to get them to do something, whether it's keep listening or opt in or buy a product. And the only way you're going to do that is if you put on a show. And it can be a podcast, a live stream, a video. Those are delivery systems. It's like saying a podcast is like saying, I'm writing you a letter. Okay, is it going to be black ink on white paper, or is it going to be a 14-page color laminated flyer with a coupon attached to it? That's the difference, I think, between, a podcast, a live stream, a video, and a show.
That makes perfect sense. So when you started to build your show outside of radio, you started on Snapchat, right?
That's right.
Great.
Yep.
And then did that bleed over into other channels? Are you doing? Do you have a podcast? Are you doing anything regularly elsewhere? Are you still hitting Snapchat really hard right now? Like what is the Mark Kaye Show ecosystem look like right now?
That's a great question. And it keeps changing, just like the internet does. As
Absolutely.
I said, Snapchat 3 years ago was the place to be for brands. And every brand just knew they had to be on Snapchat. So they were throwing a lot of money at a lot of different people, and they didn't know what they were doing. There was no way to gauge return on investment. Then, of course, they got wise and they realized they don't know how to see if there's any ROI. So we're going to stop paying as much. But then I transitioned kind of into training, because what I learned was there was a lot of opportunity for people to come and speak about Snapchat. And I got flown all over the world. I went to Germany to speak at a summit about Snapchat. I went to Las Vegas, Dallas. Everyone wanted somebody to come and explain this weird thing to them. And that was great for about a year or two. And then what I started doing was transition more into podcasting myself, and also Facebook Live. Facebook seems to be the steadfast, always faithful, always there, and always growing, and able really just to beat down any competitor, even though it may take a little bit of time. So that's where I kind of focused my efforts. In January of last year, I started a podcast, which was a political talk show based on kind of what I did for Herman Cain, and it was daily. I Facebook Lived it as well, and I published it on YouTube, and it grew so fast that it started surpassing the podcasts being created by the company I work for. And they weren't really happy about that. So one day, after about 2 or 3 months of creating this podcast, which I thought was incredible and had a huge listenership and was just, skyrocketing up the charts, they pulled me into an office, and they very politely explained to me, with lawyers present, that they didn't need me competing with them. And so I politely, stepped aside from that. And I've been working with them on some other projects. But that's when I went back into teaching. This time, instead of traveling around the entire world, I do it from the comfort of my own home, and I do it with my Facebook group and my private videos and the 1,000 Shows program, which, as you've seen, you're a part of. And that's kind of where I'm based right now, privately. And then, of course, am also employed by a company, and we make some great products with their help as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, what are some of the ways that, because I know that there's a lot of people listening who would love to emulate, this show, their favorite shows, all of this, and they want to get going. What do you think is, number one, kind of the biggest hurdle they face? And then number two, the best way for them to get that initial momentum of listeners, of traffics? Because it's one thing to kind of just put out, put your content out there. And in the past, it was a lot easier to get noticed, like on New and Noteworthy, on iTunes and all of this other stuff. Yeah. And it's becoming much more crowded. So A, what do you think is the biggest hurdle keeping people from doing this? And then B, the best way to get that initial momentum and boost?
Well, I think what I've learned over the years of doing this in all sorts of different medium is people always kind of start with an idea of like, oh, I want to do a podcast, or, I'm going to start live streaming. And then it takes them a long time to gain traction, to figure out what they're going to talk about, to see who their audience is. And then they want to make money, and they have no idea what to sell. So I always tell people to kind of flip it around. It makes it a lot easier. Instead of starting with a show, start with what you want to sell. Like, you need to know your product. And once you've come up with your product, whether it's a service or an ebook or an actual physical product, that's what you should start with. And then you look at your audience and say, okay, now who's going to buy this product? And okay, great. So now I know who the consumer is. Now I can kind of tailor make content that is kind of custom designed for them. And if you have a product, you know your market and you know what kind of content they want to create. Creating the content is so easy. A great example of this, and one that I go back to all the time, is the old infomercials with Billy Mays, who sold everything. Mm-hmm. And every infomercial works that way, and it works brilliantly because it starts with the product. Then they take the product and they go, okay, we need to figure out who the Mighty Putty, who's this for? All right, Mighty Putty's for some guy in suburbia working in a garage, and he doesn't want to weld a pipe every time it cracks. We're just going to, wrap it up. Or he's got a hole in his boat and he doesn't want to have to replace his whole boat. So they create these great visual images of Billy Mays drilling holes in a boat and then filling them with Mighty Putty and going water skiing. And, the same thing with OxyClean. There was that big visual image of a vat of red dye, and you throw the OxyClean in it, and all of a sudden everything's clean. No, where did the dye? It's all gone.
Right.
So that was a show. I mean, that was a 30-minute show that was targeted to a specific audience and sold them a specific product. And I think if more people go into their podcasts and their live streams and their vlogs and even their email sequences when they're putting together an email, I say email should be a show too. Mm-hmm. So whatever content you're creating, flip it around. Don't just try to build an audience. Start with the product and then find consumers who are interested in that product. And it's a lot easier. As far as the new and noteworthy and the best-selling list, I think those are the worst goals for someone to have, because you're gonna put a lot of time and effort and energy into it, and there's very little return. There's so many people that make it on the new and noteworthy, but in the end, they never sell anything. I'd rather have 20 people watching my show who pay me $100 a month than 100,000 people who don't pay me anything.
That's a great point. Now, but is there a way that you recommend that once people have their show, they've got a few episodes out there, that they should be working more so? And granted, I know that budget matters, but so if you have a big budget, you can buy advertising, you can do all this other stuff. Life is grand when you can do that.
Yeah.
But some of the ways to start to get publicity for your show that don't involve a big ad spend, and especially to get a little bit of that traction. And I say this also because I know that a lot of people, if they put something out, they put a lot of work into it, they put it out, and then it flops, it gets really discouraging to keep going at it. And very few people have an overnight hit.
Oh man, if you can ignore all your flops, then you definitely will be successful. It's so frustrating, especially when you have, you wake up in the middle of the night with that great idea and you're like, oh, I'm going to start this right now and it's going to be my $1 million idea. And we all have 5,000 of those.
Exactly.
If you can just forget about it, if you can ignore it and move on to the next, that's golden. A couple things, if you don't have the budget, I mean, the Gary Vee video again, and if you link to that, is a great example. This is something I knew as I was producing it, I knew would get shared. The marketing video too, I knew that would get shared because I knew the audience so well. I'm in these digital marketing groups. I work with digital marketers. I watch their videos. I buy their products. I know the kind of the stereotypes, and all my videos and all my humor kind of plays off that stereotype, which is just a way to basically, if somebody is the stereotype, they're going to share it because they can totally relate to it. So I packed every Gary Vaynerchuk stereotype I could into a 90-second video. And that helped it go viral. Now, I did put some money into it, too, because I started selling. Mm-hmm. And the best thing you can do is if you sell a product that's $100, $200, something that's low end, which for most people buying online is low end, then you can dump even half of that back into Facebook ads and see an incredible return. So, the Gary Vaynerchuk video, I've been sponsoring every day for what's it been, like 2, maybe 3 months. Mm-hmm. And I haven't done anything with it. And I keep, every day I get new members, I get new people joining my 1,000 shows program. And it's just been phenomenal. So anything you can do to get that kind of viral impact. If you're looking for bigger publicity, I'll give you one of my favorite tips. And this is how I got written up one year in Business Insider, MTV News, AOL.com. And it was all from this one simple tip. If you go to Google, and you go to Google Alerts, just type in whatever your broad topic is. For example, I did Snapchat. And every time there was an article or a blog post or a video about Snapchat, Google sent me an email. And what I did was I looked at the authors of all these blogs. And every now and then something big would come up. And I'd just write to the author and say, hey, I just read your article about Snapchat. Google sent it directly to me. I didn't have to search it out or anything. I have some more information, or I have a related story, or I'm an expert. I want to give you another take on it. And I got people writing back, sure. I mean, they needed content too. They needed to keep creating stories on these same topics for their publications. So they were happy to talk to people that could help them do their jobs.
So then would you, I interrupted there, but would you then send them some of the content that you had created about that for them to look at and then ideally share, or would you try to get into a conversation with them?
I would try to get directly into a conversation with them. I keep everything conversational. Press releases are death.
I agree with you.
I get 50 radio pub press releases a day, and they just automatically go to my junk mail, or I just delete them.
Yep.
If you want to stand out, then don't write the press release. Go on Twitter and say, hey, here verbatim, what I do is I say something like, hey, I just read your article about podcasting. I have some great information I want to share. Can you give me a good email? And, 9 times out of 10, they'll at least give you their email address. You send them a little paragraph explaining, say, when's a good time to talk? What do you, I always say something like, but you're the expert. What do you think? Would this be good for your magazine? And they think about it. Sometimes they say no. Sometimes they don't say anything. Sometimes they say, let me talk to my editor. Sometimes they say, yeah, this is right, in line with what we're working on right now. Can I call you? And then, of course, when somebody in the media says, can I call you, or are you free? The answer is always yes. I don't care. I don't care what you're doing. It's always yes. And that's a great way to get some free publicity as well.
Yeah, and I love that strategy. And there's actually a tool that I've used in the past to do this exact same thing called justreachout.io.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it allows you to search everything from blogs to different articles and even social on people who are mentioning certain keywords, much like that. And then it's got all of these pre-written, highly customizable templates to where you can just click the people you want to talk to, and then send out an email. And it's a personal email to them. It's not like a mass one, or if it is mass, it looks like that. And they've actually written quite a bit for you, so that you don't have to think of it yourself if this is not your forte. But they are not a sponsor of the show yet, but justreachout.io is a great service that I've personally used. Yet, if you guys are listening.
I like that. Yeah, power of positive thinking, Brad. That's exactly right. Yet.
Exactly. What about some of the bullet points that you write? As I mentioned, I'm a big copywriter, and I loved the bullet points and the teasers that you put on your sales page. I actually think everybody should go check it out just to read these. And I wrote down a handful of them that I really liked, and I was going to kind of bring them up to you. So, first of all, did you just reveal the only way to get on the most whatever list? Was that one of the strategies, is reaching out to people, or is there something else that?
Well, there's a couple ways. One of them is reaching out to people if they're writing a list. But, one of the other things that people underestimate is the value of email marketing. And if you have an email list and you want to get on the most whatever list, or if you want your view count to go up, or if you want some kind of, instant viewership, the best thing to do is to treat that email list like a little army of targeted whatevers that can go and, Ben Settle always says, do your bidding, which is kind of true.
Yeah, I love Ben Settle. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and a lot of he told me, I guess if you read his book, there was that one line about bullet points, and he said, it only takes one. That's why you need 148, because everyone's bullet point is different. So if they read down long enough, eventually they'll hit a bullet point. And it's true. If you go to any website and you start reading bullet points, not every bullet point pertains to you. But if one does, then you'll buy just for that one bullet point. And pretty much everybody buys for one bullet point. I only have about 30, I think. Mm-hmm. I should probably have more. But, if you go to some of these big copywriters, they've got 100 bullet points. They've got 52 bullet points, and one of them is going to make you buy. But back to your question, that is one of my strategies, is to say, look, if you want a bestseller on Amazon, you've got to get your email list to go buy the book all at the same time, all on the same day, offer some kind of incentive. If you want to get the most listened to podcast, put in 4 or 5 of them, and then blast your list over and over again and say, today's the day. I need you to go download all 5 of them. Because if you have 100 people that download 5 episodes, you're already at 500 downloads. And that's an incredible tool that I think people either are scared or embarrassed to use, or just underutilize it. But they're on your list for a reason. They want to be part of your world. They want to be part of your project. And if you need their help, they want to help you. So definitely, ask for it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, you also mentioned the power of how game shows have really dialed this in, and using some of these aspects, whether it's contests or game show elements in shows. Can you give me some examples of some of the stuff that's either worked really well for you or that you've seen and you've really liked when it comes to that kind of gamification of it?
Oh yeah, and the game shows. If you look at Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, these shows have been on every day for 30 plus years, and they have the formula. They know how to rope people in, they know how to get their attention, and they know how to keep them going. The first thing they do, and a lot of people you'll hear again. Ben Settle has a great podcast, but his intro is a minute long, and I always find myself fast forwarding it. The thing about the internet is if you go to a podcast, you already know who it is. You already know the content a little bit. You've read the description. You know who the interview's about. You don't need to reset the way you used to have to do in radio and television. I mean, in radio, when you turn on the radio, you didn't have any information. You needed to know who the artist was. You needed to know what the song was. You needed to keep resetting. But with social media, we have the luxury of just being able to jump in and grabbing people's attention from the get-go. And that's what game shows do. If you watch any game show, Wheel of Fortune's a great example. They don't do the intros of the contestants until after the first puzzle. They get in and Pat says, "Welcome to Wheel of Fortune. Let's give it a spin." And they're off with a puzzle. And it isn't until that first puzzle's done that they go back and then they talk to the people and then they introduce it. Because let's be honest, nobody really cares who's playing Wheel of Fortune. We just want to see if we could get the answer right at home before anyone else that's in the same room with us. So the contestants are all secondary. What's important is the puzzle. What's important is the game and the competition. And they know that. So they jump right in. Jeopardy does the same thing. They introduce the categories and they go right to the board and they start giving answers and asking for questions. And they don't introduce anybody until really the first commercial break, because they know they've got to get people roped in that first 5 minutes. Because on television, if you've got somebody watching for 5 minutes, they're not going to change the channel because they've already missed the 5 minutes of the show that they're changing to.
Right.
So hook them from the get-go.
So how would you use something like that more specifically in whether it's a podcast, a video show, or something where the show is not necessarily all about a game. It's not necessarily a game show. But do you have any specific recommendations for gamifying a show? Maybe it's, coming up with trivia. Maybe I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, because maybe I'll do that for my show as well. But it escapes me any specific ideas.
Sure. And gamify with the game shows, gamification is huge. And if you can use some kind of interactive way to get your audience going, absolutely. I would also watch, just like I said, those key components that they use to rope the audience in, to keep them going. But, one thing that they do that's great is they say at the end of the show, somebody could win a car, or, what's another way that they do it? They'll show you the prizes up front. And then, it won't be till the end that the person gets their choice or they get to go shopping. If you look at, some of the other popular game shows, they'll tease. If you watch America's Got Talent, they'll show you somebody hitting the golden buzzer, or they'll show you one of the judges going, "That was the best act I've ever seen," but they won't show you the act. Mm-hmm. And you're more than welcome to do that same kind of thing. You could show people a result. Or tell, if you're doing a video, you throw up a result of somebody who in one day on Shopify, for example, made $24,000 selling a mug, or selling something, and then tell them, at the end of the show, I'll reveal to you the ridiculously stupid thing they sold for $48,000 in one day. Give them 80% of it, and then hold off on the 10. Or ask them to guess. Say, if you guess what it is that made $11,000 in 4 hours on Shopify, not only will you win the contest, but I'll send you the item and a free copy of my book. Anything at all you can do to get people interacting and involved in your show. But, especially roping them in from the get-go. The news is brilliant. Have you ever watched the news?
Yeah.
I work for, we own a couple of TV stations here in town too. So I'm always in these seminars about effective teasing. And one of the things that if you watch the news, they promo it with the most obscene, ridiculous hooks, but they're like, one of them literally was, "There's 3 things in your fridge that could kill you. We'll tell you what they are at 11. So for 30 minutes, you're sitting there petrified to go to the fridge because you think you're going to die. And then at 11 o'clock, you watch, and it's basically 3 forms of, Staphylococcus A, B, C, or whatever that may be in your crisper drawer. Who even knows? It doesn't matter. you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, I have to watch the news because there's 3 things in my fridge that could kill me.
Yep.
And that's the way they rope you in. So, I mean, and again, there's a reason they're on every weekend or every night, and they're good at it.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's called many things, from an open loop where you're closing the loop later on to the Zygarnik effect, where people if you start them on a story, if you start them on something like we hate incompletion, so we'll stick around just to hear that final thing to close that loop and give us
That's exactly right.
closure, right? So, and this is not something that I've actively been doing on my show. I get on and I have conversations with people I want to talk to about things I want to talk about. I've actually proclaimed many times on my to my listeners that I have the most selfish podcast on iTunes for that exact same reason. I'm like, I know you guys are there listening. You're not at the top of my mind when I'm having these conversations, though, because I'm wanting to learn stuff for me and hopes that it bleeds over to their lives.
And those are the best shows, because anything that you do personally is gonna print more with people, because there's a lot of people just like you that have the same desires and need the same info. I mean, on the radio, there'll be times when we plan a bit or a segment or a conversation for a day or two, and we put all this emphasis into it, and we practice it, and then we do it, and I'll run home to my wife, or I'll go to someone in the office. I'll say, well, did you hear that bit today? And they're like, oh yeah, that was cool. I'm like, what do you mean cool? That was awesome. They go, yeah, it was all right. And then the next day we'll just randomly stumble into some dumb conversation about Crocs, or do you keep your peanut butter in the fridge? And someone will come up to me and be like, that was the best show. Oh my God, that was so funny. I keep my peanut butter in the fridge too. And, because those are the kind of everyday, ordinary things that everybody is dealing with.
Yeah. And that's, people are starving for entertainment, all of us. If you can combine entertainment with education, right? Edutainment, it can be gold.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's there's an art and a science to it, but these days the tools available for people to have a show, it doesn't matter if it's video, podcast, etc., are everywhere. I mean, I got started in the online business back almost, 9 years ago this month, and it's crazy, to me, just how much technology has changed and how much more democratized it is for anybody to jump in the game. But at the same time, because it's easier for everybody to get in and there's more noise in the system, you have to be better to stand out. So you have to have a framework behind what you're doing and not just get on there. And
it is true. And, there's and I'll be honest with you, there's very little new information.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's the same or similar information that's being delivered in a different way. You're wrapping yours in bacon, and that works. If you were just, if you had just a regular business podcast, that might not be as exciting and successful.
Right. And it's having some kind of a hook that I didn't personally want to come out with the Brad Costanzo show because I was not a household name. I'm well known in, my industry, but not out there widely considered an influencer, especially not when I started this. So I wanted to create something that was a hook that the listener could say, oh, okay, that's interesting. And it created enough curiosity just to go, what the heck is this bacon wrap business? I don't get it, but that's great because it creates curiosity and it can bring people in. And it's funny, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day regarding, they're just getting into this whole world, and they said, well, what if I created a membership site where I just interview experts every month and charge people like $20 a month for it? And I go, well, that used to work really, really well.
Right.
Like I remember back in the day when Eben Pagan first had his Double Your Dating business, and he had interviews with dating gurus, and he was selling them for like $20 a month, and it was like a $10 or $20 million a year business. However, because it's so easy for people to do these general interview shows like this, which used to easily be put behind a paywall, people expect it for free. So it's a lot of stuff is moving just the general interview to be free. So you have to stand out. If you're charging for it, people want insight, not just interviews. And when it's free, they want to be entertained because they can listen to an interview absolutely anywhere.
Yeah, and you're right about that. I mean, the marketing platform now is give information. So what's left to sell? And what I think most people are doing, what I do really, flat out with the 1,000 shows, is access. I'm not accessible to everybody all the time, but on Monday nights at 7 p.m., I do a live Q&A, and you're more than welcome to come in and watch and comment or leave a question beforehand, and I'll answer your question and I'll give examples. And, I even have a phone number that I'm working in so people can call and get direct access during that time frame. And that's what they're paying for. You're right, because the information is out there, and you have to give it out to show yourself as an expert. So now anything that's behind a paywall or anything that's a membership site, and more people are more looking for that direct access. And that's why you see, a bevy of coaching as well. That's why that's everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. People want the access and they want insights. And because just general information is so, people are drowning in information.
Yeah.
But
that's true.
Starving for wisdom. I think that's the, one of the quotes. Who are some of the people's shows? Okay. Besides the obviously the Gary V's, the Grant Cardones, Tom Bilyeu's from Impact Theory and people like that, who are some of the shows that you actually think are doing a good job that you have paid attention to and you think that people might want to look to for inspiration? Does anything kind of come off the top of your head for those?
Well, right off the bat, I probably have, I'll say I've been influenced the most, but I'll just admit it. I flat out stolen the most from a guy named Phil DeFranco. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a huge YouTuber. He started about 10 years ago, and he sat down on his couch and he speaks rapidly, as I do, and he jump cuts everything, and he just kind of talks about what's going on in news, on the internet, and he's built a huge channel, and not just a channel, but a business. He now has a huge studio out in LA, and he produces about 5 or 6 different channels, and on those channels, several different shows. He's merchandising of the yin yang as well. And his formula, if you look at most vloggers and a lot of people doing, pre-recorded edited shows with the jump cut, with the formula that he's put it together, they all come back from him whether they know it or not. So Philip DeFranco and he's a down-to-earth guy. He doesn't do stupid stunts. He's not lighting anything on fire. He's not playing video games for 24 hours a day. He's a good, solid entertainer who delivers great information. So I would definitely check him out on YouTube. Philip DeFranco is his name, and he's easy to find.
Yeah, I just pulled him up. So, and his is more of a general show. It's not necessarily, it's news, current events, pop culture, things like that.
Exactly, and he's big on YouTube and social media. So whenever there's whenever they have anything in YouTube, like when they demonetized everybody, he's right in there on it, and he dissects the whole thing. And whenever there's some PewDiePie does something stupid, he reports on that as well. So there's a whole it is a lot of current events, but it's more importantly social media and internet current events, which is another great reason to watch them. Some of the other great shows that I watch. I did spend a lot of time watching Casey Neistat.
Yeah, I've always loved Casey's stuff.
Yeah, I know him. I've actually been on his vlog.
Nice.
And I've been to his studio, so I always like to kind of watch the progression. But he definitely, cinematically does more than most people, and that's he's okay. Thing. Right, and he goes with his strength. Like for example, you pointed out I do comedy, and so I can go out there and try to be Tony Robbins and try to inspire people to walk on hot coals. But really, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to laugh at them when they burn their feet. So I have to go with what I know, and comedy is what I know, and that's what actually helped me work. What Casey Neistat knows is taking drone footage of New York City and riding a skateboard while operating the drone and just looking cool. Again, as a speaker, he's very monotone. He doesn't really have super insight, but he makes this beautiful film, and he does it every day. And that's another great person to watch. I love watching the Tasty videos.
Those are great.
If you want to talk about something that is a marketing sensation, the Tasty video is it takes any recipe. You can cook anything from a cookie stuffed brownie to a turkey dinner, and they'll break it down for you in a minute and a half. And everything they cook, you're like, I want to make that tonight. It's so delicious. And now, after doing this for years and accumulating, I think something ridiculous like 50 million Facebook fans, they've started selling a hot plate. And I imagine they're selling a lot of these hot plates because they're featured in every one of the videos. So, I watch a lot of stuff and I just kind of try to see what's working for people and why it's working, and then kind of twist it and turn it to match my own style and message and talents.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Are there any other unique formats that you've kind of seen that just are totally unique that you kind of found effective or not?
Well, Snapchat for a while was great because you could literally just draw on top of photo and
Right.
video and create whatever you wanted. And some of my really good friends now who are professional Snapchatters, what they've been able to create with just their finger and a phone is just insane. But that's kind of going away now. People are moving more toward
Instagram.
Instagram. And what I'm seeing with Instagram is it's all, again, it's personality, it's access. And some of the biggest stars on television are now huge stars on Instagram, and they just talk into the camera for hours on end. But they're interesting people, or they're doing interesting things, or they say something interesting. And I'll catch myself. Busy Phillips is an actress. I guess she was most popular in a show called Cougar Town. And I don't even know if she's on TV anymore, but I watch her on Instagram every day. She's super popular. Jason Biggs, his wife, has a super popular Instagram account. She's very sarcastic. She makes fun of him all the time. And, she's become a bigger star than he is. In fact, he's on a Hallmark movie or something, or an ABC Family movie. And I go, oh, look, it's Jenny's husband. Because now, to me, that's who I watch. That's where I see him. I see him on her Instagram account. So, I just, like I said, I try to watch as many different people as I can. But, if you can create a new formula, if you can take what you do and do something different with it, when the flip cam, do you remember the flip cam?
Oh yeah, I sure do.
And when the flip cam came out, I started doing something. I called myself the Flip Chef, and I started cooking recipes. They were similar to Tasty videos before Tasty, but I had my son in there, and we did Tom Colicchio's meatloaf that we saw on Top Chef one day, and I tried to make those peanut butter cookies with the Hershey's Kiss for Christmas, and those videos got several thousand views. But then what happened was the flip company went out of business. So being the Flip Chef didn't really pan out because everyone just started shooting video on their iPhones. But again, just take your talent, find a unique twist, try something new. If it fails, try something else. Like you said, if that fails, try something else. I mean, 1,000 shows is not my first foray into membership programs. It's probably my fourth, but it's the first one that's actually worked. Because I learned from people. I learned what people wanted. I learned the frequency they wanted it. I learned how they wanted their content delivered. I learned about myself. I learned, I tried to do a newsletter like Ben Settle, but I realized I don't have the patience to write a 16-page newsletter every week, every month rather. But I can turn on a camera and talk for an hour, no problem. So you need to look at what your audience wants. You need to look at what you're capable of doing, what you do best, and try to find a happy medium.
No, I love that. That's very, very sound advice. What's kind of a nut you're trying to crack right now in your business, your life? And by that, I mean, maybe it's just get more eyeballs on your offer of helping people to create their own show, which is 1000shows.com, right?
1000shows.com.
What else? Is there anybody you're looking to meet, people you're looking to hire, skills you're trying to learn, nuts you're trying to crack? Is where we can potentially help you.
And I appreciate all that. I mean, I have, I've been kind of in the radio business forever, and one thing that I've always wanted to do and kind of look to do is foray from what I do now into entertainment, which is entertainment radio, into full-time talk radio. I'm always looking for opportunities with that. As far as online, one of my favorite things to do is speak to an audience, and getting up on stage, going to these huge events is my favorite thing, even more so than radio and television.
Yeah, no, I love it as well.
It's the best feeling in the world. You get that, if something you say, you can hear the people gasp, oh, wow, I never heard that. Or you can hear them laugh or not laugh, which is another great, which is just as informative if you crack a joke and nobody laughs. And that's my favorite thing. Now, the difficulty I have there is being able to travel with a full-time job, with 2 kids and a wife. So this 1,000 shows has actually kind of been, it's like I get to go out and speak every single week, but I just do it here at my home office, and I don't have to travel around the world. So that's how I kind of look at it. I look at it as these are people that are paying money. They're coming to a conference every week. They have questions. They need me to give them that aha moment, and I have the power to deliver that, basically in my underwear, and then go to bed and wake up and go to work. And that's kind of why I'm building it, and that's why I think it's successful, and that's why I'm going to continue to build it.
No, that's great. Now, I have I think I found one more bullet point.
Oh, good, yeah.
That you said, and it goes back to, actually there was 2. What is the Donald Trump press conference tactic that makes people addicted to watching you?
Oh, the Donald Trump press conference tactic is to never answer the question. I mean, if somebody asks you a question, the thing you need to realize with questions is, and the best speakers and the most successful people do this, a question is just what you need to sit through before you get to deliver your message. And every press secretary, every political superstar knows this, that when someone asks you a question, all it is 20 seconds where you have to be quiet before you can say pretty much anything you want. In fact, I've done it 9 times during this interview. You've asked me a question. I've delivered some answer that I wanted, that I wanted to tell you. And then I go, oh, wait a minute. I should probably circle back to the actual question. But that's something that you need to realize. If you have pertinent information, you're just, a question is just somebody taking a little bit of time before you can put on your show, is basically what it is. And that's what Donald Trump does better than anyone. He never answers the question. He says what he wants to say, and he gets it out there.
That's fantastic. That's so true. Well, I can tell you my audience this, hopefully you guys have enjoyed the insights that Mark has been sharing. As I mentioned, I actually saw this. I went and I purchased 1000shows.com, which a lot of it is stuff that I didn't personally need, but I'm the type of person to where if I think there's 1 or 2 nuggets that will help me out, I'll invest in myself and I'll put that out there. And Mark, you've done a great job. I'm looking at the inside of the membership area now for 1000 shows, and people will be very surprised by how affordable it is.
Oh, thanks.
But he does show you how to pick your product, how to pick your audience, your medium, your network, and go through the most important things that are necessary to not only just get the show up off the ground. And by the way, the technical stuff is the easiest. By far the easiest. It's so easy to create a show technically. It's creating a framework for putting the content out that can be the most frustrating for a lot of people. I mean, I'm kind of good at this naturally, and it was still frustrating. It took me a long time to kind of understand the format that I wanted to have. So if this is something that you, dear listener, have thought about doing, and I recommend highly having a show, it is when I look back at the course of just the past year and all of the really cool business opportunities and that I've had this year, from clients to partnerships, etc., 100% of them have come as a direct result of the podcast Bacon Wrap Business that you're listening to now. Sometimes it's from the guests, sometimes it's from the audience, but it's really amazing at a show's ability to not only give you access to influence, but build your own access and your own influence. And the two of those just work like compound interest, and you'll be amazed at how some of the opportunities that'll come through your door when you start to do this. And you don't have to be the biggest show in the world, as long as it's something good and it's adding value in the form of entertainment or education or combination thereof. But I highly recommend that you go check out 1000shows.com if you've liked what Mark has had to say, because he's going to show you a very simple way to get this going and off the ground. So, Mark, there's a little unsolicited testimonial for you.
I'm going to have that transcribed and put that. That's amazing. Thanks, Brad. That was great.
No,
that was better than anything I wrote.
No, but by all means. Now, to all of my listeners, I should have some kind of a contest or a gamification aspect on this. I don't. However, I do want to make a request to everybody. I just finished reading a fantastic book, and I'm about to go on vacation for 3 weeks over the course of Christmas and New Year's. I'm going to Brazil with my lovely wife. It's going to be amazing, and I'm not going to be able to speak to anybody down there except for her, because nobody speaks English, and I don't speak pork and cheese. So I need book recommendations. I need you, dear listeners, to email me at askbrad@baconwrapbusiness.com books that have inspired you, educated you, provoked your thoughts, and that have really made an impact on your life. I will probably read 4 or 5 books when I'm down there. And if I read one of your books, I will send you a very special surprise gift. You just have to email me at askbrad. Oh, see, I just gamified this shit. Look at me.
Look, see, it's not that hard.
It's not that hard. To askbrad@baconwrappedbusiness.com. Go check out Mark's program, 1000shows.com, and take a look at that. Also, take a look at some of the show notes, because you'll see some of the videos that we talked about in here, including the ones that originally got my attention to Mark. And I think you'll really like what you see and potentially be very inspired. And lastly, if you have enjoyed this, you can hit the share button and share it on social media. Tag myself at Brad Costanzo and tag Mark. I'm assuming it's at Mark Kaye, Kaye, unless it's like, what's your Twitter handle there, Mark?
My Twitter handle is actually at Mark K Show.
Cool. At Mark Kaye Show.
Yeah.
And I'll put that in the show notes as well. But yeah, tag us. Let us know if you really enjoyed this. And I highly encourage you to subscribe to the show if you haven't, because next week I do have another cool surprise episode coming up for you. You do not want to miss it. And Mark, thank you so much for being a guest on Bacon Wrap Business today.
Oh, great. Hey, thanks so much. The pleasure was mine. This was so much fun. I enjoyed it.
Good. I'm glad. Guys, I will see you next week. Stay tuned, and don't hesitate to reach out and let me know if I can give you a second opinion on something that's not quite working the way you want it to. Talk to you soon.